My name is Erich Reed, and I'm the director of the Southwest Harbor Public Library. A few pitches for the library. We're open for 15-minute browsing appointments, and we continue to offer curbside service. And we are pleased to announce that we went live with our new website today. This weekend brings the Acadia Vendors Market Yard Sale, and we'll have a table of high interest books that will be sale by donation. So we hope to see some of you there. In 2 weeks, we will welcome Chris Herpers of Biblioteca. He will give a presentation on how to get the most out of your cloud library account, as you can access almost 250,000 ebooks and audiobooks with your up-to-date Southwest Harbor Library card. Also, keep an eye out for anthropologist Jeff DeVito. He's studied the impact of tourism, not only on the places they visit, but on the tourists themselves. We are recording tonight's event, and it should be available on our YouTube channel within the next few days. This presentation will be about an hour, and we'll have a question and answer session afterwards, facilitated by library staff member Elliot Santavica at the end of the talk. Please send us questions throughout this event. We are so pleased to have John and Beth Sundberg here tonight. They mentioned that they've come to many programs and enjoy many programs at the Southwest Harbor Public Library, and they felt like this was a good time for them to do their share and present. They've lived in Southwest Harbor for well over 30 years. John is a veterinary pathologist and professor who ran a research lab at Jackson Labs and continues to work part-time. Beth is a software engineer at the Jackson Lab. She works part-time in the computational sciences department, developing and testing software for a variety of genetic projects. They both have been involved with living history groups for many years. When they first came to Maine, they joined the Ancient Ones of Maine and later helped found the Acadia Frontiersmen, two groups focused on American history pre-1840, specifically the mid-1700s. There are over 80 of you registered for this event tonight. Please together warmly welcome John and Beth Sundberg.
Thank you. I couldn't start until I got unmuted. So welcome everybody. As Eric said, that we've enjoyed many of the Zooms that others have presented here in our library and other libraries around the region, and thought it was time to be participants, not just observers. So we had the opportunity a number of years ago now to hike Hadrian's Wall in England. Oops. There it goes. It's also the Vale Alii National Trail. Velum in Latin means wall, although the Celts misinterpreted it as the ditch that was dug on either side of the wall. So from here on, when I talk about the Velum, it's the ditch on either side, not the actual wall. And Emperor Hadrian's family name was Aelius, and the purpose was qui barbaros Romanes dividerit, to separate the barbarians from the Romans. So it's something like the Trump wall down south in the United States, with many of the same reasons: keep the barbarians out, but also to regulate trade and collect taxes. So I was rather amazed that I never understood that the Romans had occupied what we call England today. They called it Britannia for almost 400 years. I never learned that in world history, so it was kind of a surprise. And I never heard of Hadrian's Wall. When I saw this movie, as many of you probably did, King Arthur, that came out in 2004, and it was all about activities around Hadrian's Wall. And these are some screenshots that I got off the web. And these are computer-generated images of what it probably looked like. And from the pictures along the way and looking at the ruins, it probably looked somewhat similar to this. And it extended across from sea to sea in the northern end of England, which was the frontier of the Roman Empire. and it looked something like this. There was a mile castle every mile, and then there were 2 turrets in between, and this long linear wall. There was a fort just south that was built before this, Vindolanda, that was the translation was the White House, because the Romans like to plaster everything white. So that supposedly the wall was plastered white as an added emphasis. So other movies had reference to it as well. This is from Robin Hood that came out in 1991, and this is the wall here, although that's never really discussed in the movie as I remember, but it was something that the locals pointed out when we were hiking the wall. And then more recently, the show Game of Thrones, one of my wife's favorite, talks about the great ice wall shown over here. And this is built on the concept of Hadrian's Wall. So where is it? What is it? And how do we figure this all out besides seeing a movie? Well, being a scientist at the Jackson Laboratory, I had the opportunity to travel quite a bit, and often coming to Europe, I'd fly into or through London. And when I'm in London, I have a colleague up at Cambridge, so a 45-minute train ride up there to visit him. And when my wife joined me on these visits, we wouldn't work constantly. We'd take an afternoon off and go do a little sightseeing. And after hearing about Hadrian's Wall, I said, well, let's go take a look at that. And he said, John, do you know where that is? Not a clue. It's at the other end of the country. So it's almost a day's trip by train to get up there. So it's not an afternoon hike. But in 2013, I had a meeting in Edinburgh. And after the meeting was over, we took a train down to this side, the western side in Carlisle, and hiked the trail. Now, as you can imagine, when you're on a business trip and you've got a suitcase full of dress clothes and posters for presentations and things like that, it's a little hard to think about taking a camping trip and carrying your backpack and tent and all that stuff with. So my wife poked around and she found this particular outfitter that would set the whole tour up for us. And there's others that you can do as well, use as well. This one happens to be one of the first ones to get this program going in this area. They offer this is the website I looked at in February just for this talk, and you can get a 6-day trek, a 7-day trek, and go camping and all sorts of things. And it's great. They'll just set it all up for you. We selected the bed and breakfast options. There's 3 different levels based on the quality of the rooms you want to stay in. Just to give you an idea, we did a 6-night, 5-day hike of about 55 miles. I just picked 7 nights just to give you an idea what they cost today. So this is a conversion into US dollars. So $700 to $900 per person to set this up. And this is a bed and breakfast, and they'll transfer your bags. So you show up, you drop your bag off, you go to bed, get up, have breakfast, and in the morning they transfer your bag to the next place. All you do is carry a day pack with a lunch and whatever you want for clothes in there. So as I said, we started in Edinburgh, took a train down to Carlisle, and then hiked all the way over to Newcastle. Now, when I got to Cambridge on the way to do this, my buddy gave me a copy of this book as a gift. And I have the book here. And it's really fun. This is a library talk, so I have to talk a little bit about a book. And the library has ordered this. It'll be in a couple of weeks. And this is really interesting to give you a lot of the political and social background of the whole concept of the wall and the forts all around it. So if you're going to do a trip like this, it's really fun to read this. I got to read it on the train up to Edinburgh and all through the trip and on the flight home. So it really was fun. So who is Hadrian? His Latin name is Publius alias Hadrianus. He was 68 years, he lived to be 68 years old, died of congestive heart failure. He was the emperor of Rome for 21 years. And along the way in some of the museums, you'll find reproductions of the bust of what he looked like or caricatures. So Julius Caesar actually crossed the Great Ocean, which we call the English Channel today, before Christ, but didn't stay. Emperor Claudius came over in AD 43 and did conquer Britannia at that point and set up colonies and forts at that point. Hadrian came over in 122. When he became emperor, he went to all the provinces in the Roman Empire to look them over. When he came to the Britannia, he thought that instead of constantly expanding and conquest more land, which is the tradition of what Roman emperors did, he decided he would consolidate and control what he had and put up the wall. So he ordered the wall to be built in AD 122. Now, when I was looking at some details up for this presentation, I found some websites said it was 73 miles long and some said it was 80 miles long, which didn't make any sense. How could a fixed structure vary by 7 miles? And the answer is, how do you define a mile? So today we define a mile as 5,280 feet. But the Romans, it was milecastles, 1,000 paces, which was 5,000 Roman feet. So a mile is not a mile, depending on how you measure it. So it's a little shorter. So different references, different websites give you different lengths of time for completion. 6 years is the minimum to get the structure up. The plan was to build it of turf on either end by the seas where there weren't a lot of quarries, and stone through the middle where the biggest traffic was. So there are 14 forts and then another 2 later because other references give 16. How many people built it? Again, that varies depending on who you read or what segments, but it ranged from 3 legions of 5,000 men each, which would be 15,000 men plus slaves, and other references said it was up to 30,000. Each legion had master masons, carpenters, and blacksmiths, so they were able to build just about anything just by themselves. After he died, Hadrian died, the next emperor, Antoninus Pius, built another wall further north. This was an earthen wall. And after 20 years, it was abandoned. They went back and maintained Hadrian's wall. And they used Hadrian's wall for 300 years. So this is from the English Heritage website, Emperor Claudius in AD 43, and the Roman army left in AD 410. 122, Hadrian had the wall built. It has 3 massive bridges, 16 forts, 80 milecastles. So there's a bigger structure every 80 of them along the length of it, and 160 turrets. So there's 2 turrets between every milecastle. So this gives you a rough idea of what's left. So it was about 15 feet high when it was intact. I'm 6 foot tall. And this is one of the areas where the highest point is. So every mile, there was a milecastle, which had a gateway. And between the milecastles were 2 turrets, 16 forts. The wall was 8 to 10 feet wide and 15 feet high. And it went from sea to sea. So we took the train down to Carlisle from Edinburgh. And you can see the blue line here is Hadrian's Wall. And we walked to the east. We did not quite get to Newcastle. So we did not go to the ocean to ocean. We didn't have enough time to do that. So when you get there, we went to the bed and breakfast, dropped off our luggage, and then went into town to see what sites there were. And like many English cities, there's a big castle. We got to poke around that a little bit. And as the village blacksmith, as a hobbyist, of course, I had to look at the gates and the hinges. So you'll see a few of those throughout the lecture. And I have a reproduction Brown Bess musket, so that's nice to see an original in one of their exhibits. And this just shows some of the Roman influence 500 years later. The GR on the lock plate stands for Georg Rex, King George III. And if the fire marshal is looking around and paying attention to this, I do not have a 100-pound barrel of black powder in my house. So there's a museum there, an art museum with other stuff. And they have a Roman exhibit. But outside the museum, I didn't see this when we got there because there's a big crowd, but this is an outline of the wall with the highlights right in the walkway. And inside the museum, there's an exhibit that shows what the sheepskin tent that the Roman soldiers would camp in as they built the wall, the type of armor, and the type of cooking utensils they use. And this is very similar to the type of cooking outfit that many of us use in our 1750 living history activities today. This is the type of bed and breakfast we stayed at in Carlisle. And we got up in the morning, put on a day pack, and carried some coats and rain gear. Now, we've listened to Harry Krish give a number of talks about hiking the Appalachian Trail, and everybody says, what did you wear for footwear? And if you notice, my wife here is wearing bean boots. This is the footwear choice. Nobody, I think, had ever seen bean boots when we were there, and everybody was fascinated. But as you'll see, you spend the next 5 days walking through sheep pastures that are wet and full of sheep poop. So we asked in the morning, where's the wall, and where's the trail? And she says, just look for the little sign with the acorn on it and follow that. That's all you have to do. So this is another piece of information. My wife always likes to know, how much are we going to hike up? What is the elevation? And this is a cross section across England of what the elevation changes that you do in the hike. But the big point is maximum elevation is just over 1,000 feet, which is 2/3 of climbing up of the height to climb up Cadillac. So it's pretty flat. And as you get away from town, you'll find a post like this that marks the path with the acorn, and you pay attention. There's lots of interesting wildlife all the time. And this is how you start off. It's basically the earthen wall, which you don't see anything of. It's kind of disappointing. It's just a bare path along the edge of a fence row, and oh yes, there's the sheep. And here it is again, and there's the sheep. Now you see the nice blue sky, but you also notice I'm wearing rain gear and a cover on my backpack. We just had a big storm. And the other thing is, this was May when we were hiking the middle of May, and I had the wool hat on, and we were very happy to have that. It was like May last year here when we had snow in the middle of May. As you start along the trail, there's lots of little signs that you come across that give you detail, much of which I've already presented. But the nice thing is they show you what the wall probably looked like when it was intact. And starting off, nice little trails, nice little bridges. The blue flowers are opening up. Stone paths, it looks very nice, but it doesn't look like much different than some of the trails you find around here. And it's pretty flat through farmland. And there's a farm down here, and you walk along, and a little bit of a depression. And whenever we lived in the Midwest for a while, and anytime you see a row of trees in a field, that means there's a stream there. So every once in a while, you'll find a little stream crossing. And down there was a little tree. And here's a silo, which I'll show you a close up in a second. So as you go down by those trees, by the little stream, there's a box. You find these along the trail. As you open the box up, there's some water and cookies or something like that. You can leave a donation. But here's that silo, and there's the loo. We call them a hooter up here. And I like this sign where there's a problem, you call the head office. And we thought this was rather nice. It's about time we needed to use the privy. And it was nice and clean. And lo and behold, this was probably the last one we were going to see on this trip other than at the museum. So if you do a hike like this, you get to use the bushes a lot. We were hiking about 10 miles a day. And the end of the first day, we had to cross over this bridge that you can't drive on. On the other side, there's a placard built in 1724 for 493 pounds. So it's about the cost of taking a 7-day bed and breakfast tour at the low end today. And across the bridge is the remnants of an abbey, the ruins of an abbey. And of course, there's some really interesting hinges and door knockers. But inside, there's some very magnificent masonry. But if you notice the stones up here, they look very similar, as you'll see later on, to the stones in Hadrian's Wall. And these probably are the stones from Hadrian's Wall. So the reason Hadrian's Wall is largely remnants is not because it fell down, because it was poorly constructed, but because everybody pilfered it. So that night we stayed at the old blacksmith's house, which is now a very nice bed and breakfast, big old anvil outside. And you meet people along the trail. These guys were headed the same direction we went. We saw them later on. These are three fellows from Scotland. They were high school buddies, and every summer they take a hike together. So we had dinner with them, and after dinner they invited us to the lounge and proceeded to open up a big bottle of scotch and teach us how to drink scotch correctly. And as I said, we saw them later on the trail. And a lot of times when you take a trail for a length of a distance, you'll meet people constantly going in the same direction. So as you get away from the cities, you'll start to see more of the beginnings of the wall. And they had nice signs that tell you some information about it and where you are. So here's where it is on a satellite map. And because there's quarries nearby, they were able to build that out of stone. And you'll see, as I show these periodically, there'll be quarries right next door. Now that they had to carry everything on horses or on their backs, so they wanted it nearby. And this is from the satellite. You can see part of the wall even next to a farm. Here's one of the turrets. This is the base of the wall. And you can see what's here. It doesn't look like much until you sit back and think about that this was built 1,899 years ago. And the only reason it's not totally erect is because people pilfered the stones to build other things, other buildings out of it. It did not collapse. So a lot of it, you're walking along and you'll see these nice straight lines. Here's a road, but these are sheep pastures. And every time there's a line here, that's a property boundary, which means there's a fence. So there's an awful lot of going through gates, climbing over the walls, more gates, follow the acorn. And some of them have these stone steps coming out of the wall. So you get that's where you get the elevation is going up because they're very close together in some places. Here's another turret and some of the more modern stones cut out, giving you information. And again, this will give you an idea what the turrets probably look like, and they're different shapes as you see from the different signage. This is also one of the earthen mounds. So they would build a stone foundation with mortar, and then they would cut out big pieces of sod and layer them and form a wall like this. But they dig a ditch that would be 15 feet, 20 feet deep on either side, the vellum, and there would be no drainage, so it'd fill up with water and brambles would grow in there. So these were pretty good deterrents. But again, you can see the turret is here, so you can get an idea of the size with Beth in there. There are a number of forts that you encounter along the wall, and this is one. And inside you can see a reproduction of what they thought the wall actually looked like when it was intact and what a Roman soldier manning the wall would be dressed like. And then outside it's been excavated and you can see the outline of the different buildings. Now, I'll show you later on, there's a fort that has not been excavated, so you can see what it probably looked like before the archaeologists got here. And here's some of the other parts of the periphery of that fort. More gates to go through, and this was the middle of May, and then you see all these little white things here. That's hail. So we had a pretty good hailstorm one day. So I was a little surprised. I wasn't expecting the middle of May to be quite as cold and wet as it was there, but then we had a May like that last year here with snow. There were 3 large bridges built. And this is a depiction of what they look like with these big arches. They built cofferdams around the base and sunk the pilings into the underlying ground. So this is a huge construction. They used this for 300 years. And this is some of the what's left of the bridges. And where's the river? Well, the river's down over here. This was built 2,000 years ago, so the river is meandered away from here. That's why they're not right next to each other. Here's another example here. And as you're walking along, you'll see that there's a nice bed and breakfast over here, and the same kind of stone in this. It's like an old garage. There's a little bronze plate there, and it says, "Oh, the Centuria Gellius Philippus built this." So this is probably 1,500 years old or more. Looks like it's pretty new. Here's another turret. So there's 160 turrets. So I didn't take a picture of every one of them. But here's a different style with the stone wall here, and you can see how that's set up. And here's one of the milecastles that have been excavated, so you can see the size of the structure. Another bed and breakfast, and oh, the stones look like those in the wall, because that was the wall. And the next morning we got up and walking along, and there's an old castle, Thirlwall Castle. And you can, again, it looks just like the wall, but it's higher, and it's falling down. And there's no fences. You can walk around, poke around all you want, which we did. So here's an example. Here's the aerial view, and again, another quarry. But you can see here's another milecastle down here. Here's the Thirlwall Castle from the satellite, and you can see the outline of it right there next to the big barn. As you continue down, oh, there's another quarry not too far away. And then there's a Roman army museum. And when I pulled these up a week or so ago, it says temporarily closed. Fortunately, it was open when we were there. So it was interesting to see up close reproduction of a Roman chariot and Roman soldiers in the different types of outfits that they used. And this particular one I found very interesting. The lorica segmentata. It's a leather armor that they wore. And the reason it was interesting to me is that my friend Dennis Roop discovered a protein in the skin that acts as a barrier, and he named it loricrin after this particular outfit. So as you get into the middle of the wall, much more of it is in place. And there were a number of conservators that really felt that this should be saved and not just pilfered, and started trying to save it and rebuild it to a degree, and also cap it off. So there's more modern mortar in the top here where they put rocks and tried to cover it over, keep it from deteriorating. But there are places like this that you can walk on, and it goes for miles like this. Now, the Romans weren't stupid. They didn't like digging ditches all the time when they could follow along a cliff. This is the wind sill. And this is where two tectonic plates came together, and then the southern side uplifted, which is why you have these cliffs here. And it ran right along the cliffs. So one of the peculiarities of the Roman architecture is that they built using a standard format, and they built all over their empire. There's the same type of wall. They have one in Germany that many people told us about that's very similar to this, and they had some in North Africa like this. And they have the turrets and milecastles on a very precise interval. And there's one that has a gate, milecastle has a gate that opens up to the top of the cliff, because that was the standard format, and they had to do it. Here's another one of the forts that's been excavated and maintained. And here it is. You can see it from the satellite, and you can see the outline. And when you get down on the ground and look around it, it's amazing, considering this is 2,000 years old. Another one of the bridges, what it looked like, and here's the abutments. Here's another one of the quarries. And this is what it looks like on the ground. Now this one, an entrepreneur decided they were going to turn this into a Roman stone quarry limited and sell the rock off. And they went right up to and started tearing the wall down in the process, and until several groups got after them and made them stop. So it's the same color rock that you see in there. Here's the wall coming down, and they just used it all. If you feel like having afternoon tea, there's tea rooms and campsites, but you had to walk a mile or two off the trail. So we just kept on going because we were on a bit of a tight schedule. At the high point is a concrete pillar like this. And then you keep going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it winds around, follows the cliffs. And it's springtime and the leaves are starting to come out. There's a tree right here, which is kind of interesting. You don't really pay attention to it, but if people hadn't pointed out to you ahead of time, you wouldn't look to go down in the little gully here and look at it at 90 degrees. But this is called Sycamore Gap. And this is from the scene from the Robin Hood movie. And here's where it's located from the satellite view, and you can see how the wall runs along the cliff. Here's another bed and breakfast. And I have to say, now that we're senior citizens, it's rather nice to be able to go hiking all day in the rain and cold and come to a bed and breakfast, take a warm shower, and have a nice bed and not be carrying your pack on your back all the time. Another one of the big forts. And you can see it from the satellite, and it's quite obvious. And down on the ground, it's pretty spectacular. Now, the problem we ran into here was this is the last day of the hike. And even though we've been hiking about 10 miles a day, the last day was 19 miles. And this was right at the beginning of the trip. And we wanted to see everything and take pictures of everything and poke it around. And my wife kept saying, we're never going to make it if we stay here all day. We got to get going. We got to get going. But this was rather spectacular. This is the Roman bath. And all these little pillars support these stone plates. And the opening down here, what they did is they were outcrops of coal that they would harvest and bring down here and start a fire. And they'd have a fire going underneath this structure. And this is how they made the Roman bath work. Shows you what the fort was supposed to look like. And again, what the profile looked like, where the gates would be. And again, looking back at the scenes from King Arthur, they were somewhat similar. So I think there's some degree of validity to the general format of what they showed in that movie. And again, you can look at where they've excavated and preserved it, so you can get an idea of the size and expanse of these structures. And there's sheep everywhere. Occasionally you see horses and cattle, but it's mostly sheep. Here's another fort. This has not been excavated. And down here is a temple. So this is the temple. It's not a particularly large thing. And there's altars and there's the god. And this is the fort, which has not been excavated by archaeologists. So it's just sitting there. But it was used from 134 to 383. What is that? That's 249 years. It was actively used and manned. The United States is only 245 years old. So what military outposts do we have that are still in existence that long? Probably West Point is the only one that I can think of. So at this point, we're running late. It's long and straight. Most of the wall has pretty much been gone. You're going through pastures or along the road, and we got another 5 miles to go. It's getting close to 5 o'clock or so, and we had to be at the bed and breakfast by 6. We knew we wouldn't make it, and off in the distance we saw a building. So the Robin Hood Inn, which was a pub, and we went in there, and they helped us get a phone number. We called a taxi, and we took a taxi ride home on to the next bed and breakfast. So we cheated at the end, but that had given us time to go explore the last fort. So that's basically the World's End. That's the end of the trail. This happens to be from a pub in Edinburgh, but I thought it was an interesting way to end the presentation. Now, while the wall has largely been dismantled, there's other Roman structures around Europe that are really quite impressive. We had a chance at a meeting in Barcelona to go south to a city called Tarragona, and this is Ponte Diablo, the Devil's Bridge. This is an aqueduct. It's pretty much intact, and if the water was running, it would go right across to the city. And downtown in the city is the amphitheater. So there's a lot of Roman structures all over Europe that are really fascinating. And these are just, they're 2,000 or more years old. And I'm just amazed at that. So just a week or two ago, one of my classmates sent me this cartoon, which he sends cartoons all the time, but he didn't realize I was getting this presentation. And along the wall was a paved highway, which is the old Roman military road that was made with cobbles like this. And without a single degree, they built us roads that have lasted an eternity. So the Romans really did quite a job building these structures. So thank you for your attention. And I'll stop there.
All right, and now we'll turn to some questions. Sorry, I have a mask on because there's other people in the room with me, but we turn to the chat box, which if anyone has any questions, they can send them right to the Q&A box. So our first question is, if you could talk about what time of year you think would be best to do this hike.
You want to answer that one?
But we did it when we could do it. All right. So I'm Beth. So I think that it really just has to do with your personal preference. I mean, England is a much warmer climate than here, but it's wet and drizzly. And we ran into the fact that you get up high in the middle. I mean, even it's only 1,000 feet, but it's still, for England, it's up high. It's not like Scotland, which does have some mountains. But there's a lot of wind and there's a lot of rain. And so we did find that we did the right thing. And we went from west to east because primary weather comes from the west there. And we figured that if we had bad weather, it would be to our back. Well, the day that we were in the middle and we were going up and down, the weather came from the north and it didn't matter which direction you were going. And so, you know, I mean, in the summer, it would have been a lot busier. I think that the trail, we found that the trail had people on it, but it wasn't like mobbed with people. But in the summer, just like anywhere, you're going to find a lot more people. And probably the fall would be pleasant also. The winter there is chilly and bleak. That's my opinion of England. And we were in England in January once. So we were quite happy with when we went, but that again was based on the fact that that's the time of year that we had the opportunity to go.
Mm-hmm. And then there was a follow-up question with that was what kind of dress footwear recommendations you have, if you have any more besides the bean boots and rain gear.
Waterproof, I guess. I mean, the thing with bean boots is that they're fairly waterproof, and we wear wool socks with them, so they keep your feet warm. Mm-hmm. Just because if it's wet, it's not very pleasant to be trotting around in foot gear that isn't going to keep your feet dry. And if it's wet, of course, there's spots where it's muddy. We've had, actually, it wasn't super bad. Their goal, this is a national trail, and their goal is to keep people walking either in single file or in just a double file, so to speak, so they can keep as much of the trail as they can grassed over and not a mud hole. But you found spots where there was unavoidable mud. So you want to actually just kind of be prepared for that. And the bed and breakfasts were all very funny because they all met and they all said, okay, boots come off right here. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things you want in your luggage is something else to put on your feet while you're at the bed and breakfast.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of bed and breakfasts, oh, sorry, go ahead, John. I think our audio might be cutting out a little bit. Yeah, John, we actually can't hear you at the moment. Let me see here. You were having a problem with your speaker. All right, I think we got you back now. Maybe.
Can you hear me?
Very softly, but
Looks like coming up. Is that better?
yeah, a little bit.
I mean, it's simple point, but you're walking through sheep pasture, so you're getting a lot of manure on your feet. Regular hiking with corrugated soles. A little unpleasant.
Hmm.
But it gives you pride. We were surprised how many people
Yeah, so yeah, John, we're not quite getting you. Beth, could you try one more time?
Oh, I don't know. Is my voice any louder?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
you're coming through
Oh,
wonderfully.
that's funny.
So I have one question for both of you, and maybe Beth, you should answer. Is that travel can be stressful. So how do you complement one another, when such, grand adventures?
We like hiking together. So I don't know. It isn't too big of a problem for us. We both like to be organized. So I think our biggest, especially me. So if I always find if I'm organized and know where I'm supposed to be and what I'm doing, it really helps. And one of the nice things about the company we went through was it gave us a great itinerary with lots of information. What do you need to wear? What do you need to carry? What are they going to do for you? What are you going to find? And they gave us this. We got a cute little book. I don't know if you can actually, the light is bad on it, but it says the essential companion to Hadrian's Wall Path. And then this is a map that we got that actually is nice because it shows the whole length of it, towns and things. Great to help you out, figure out where you are during the day, how much further you got to go, that kind of stuff. But they had good directions how to find the bed and breakfast because they were never right there. Of course, we always had to go off to the side somewhere. Also, the B&B people were wonderful. One place, which was a little further away, said, call us when you get to the parking lot at this spot on the wall. We'll come pick you up, which they did, and they dropped us off in the morning. And the second place that we walked to, and they had a problem with their shower. And because they had the problem, they took us to another spot. They said, no problem. We're just going to move you there. Your luggage is there already. And the owner of that one gave us a ride to get started because they were further off the wall. And we didn't know where we were at that point.
The other issue was about meals that I meant to talk about this. At their bed and breakfast, and they're in the middle of nowhere. They're farmhouses essentially. So they asked if you didn't have a way to get a meal that you called the day ahead of time, and they would have dinner ready for you. And they would also pack the lunch. These were extra charges, but you didn't have much choice if you didn't have a car. There were the three guys from Scotland had 2 cars, and they were doing the car jumps between places, but we were hiking in one direction.
Could you also mention the name of the company that you had used for your B&Bs?
It was in the presentation.
Yeah, we had a question if you could say it again just so they have it.
So it's something to do with Hadrian's Wall. I mean, the Hadrian's Wall is right in the name of the company. It's probably in that folder somewhere, John. All right. You guys, another question?
And I actually had a question for you. How far of a distance is it that you walk for the day between the B&Bs?
They're about 10 miles.
10 miles?
Plus or minus. So we did a little over 50 miles in 5 days.
And we're losing you again, John.
So he says the average was 10 miles. It varied a little bit from one to another. The middle, which is the part where it really goes up and down and is considered to be most strenuous, we did between 7 and 8. That stretch. That was, I think, our shortest stretch. And that last stretch, that was 19 miles. And we didn't actually realize it was going to be that long. And then it just We did. We spent too much time at the fort at the beginning. And I was tired. All right, I found it. It's called Hadrian's Wall Limited, Ltd. Anyway, yep, with .uk at the end. So it's actually www.hadrianswall.ltd.uk. That's what it says in my folder.
Mhm.
And they're not the only place, but they were one of the groups of people who actually spent a lot of time trying to get Hadrian's Wall to become a national trail. And part of doing that was providing this service. Okay, you know, if we can make this a trail that you can go end to end, and we can get you back and forth, you know, by providing the transportation and the help finding where you're staying, it's just really valuable. So we thought it was a great idea to go through them. But there are other companies. There were companies that had shorter stretches. You could have done, you know, shorter hops. But again, it's all in when you make your reservations and what's available for the bed and breakfast. Because when a bed and breakfast is full, it's full, right? So we found that that was a really important that we made our reservations fairly well in advance. We also didn't do the too far ends simply because of time. The Carlisle End, we could have gone down to the shore and back because, or stayed down there and just started there. But we figured we were coming from Scotland. We knew we could get to Carlisle on a train. We didn't know what time of day we were going to be able to get there because of the conference. And when we got to the far end, that last stretch is through the city, which we thought would be much less interesting. Maybe we would have been wrong, I don't know, but then because there's a nice fort at the far end that we'd missed. We also had advice that was given in the information where people take a break day in the middle. There's a couple of museums and things that are not directly on the trail that are in the center that you could spend a day and go and visit and kind of rest your legs a little bit if that was valuable to you. And you can get around, actually, there's taxis. In the summer, there's trains that run all the way between the two ends. So you could get there if you wanted to do only a piece in the middle by train.
All right, and this is the last question we have in the Q&A box. If anyone has any more, they can still submit them and we can get to them. But what time in the morning did you guys start your hikes?
So this had to do with the bed and breakfast. You know, they're a bed and breakfast and they go, it's going to be such and such time. And it might not be until like 7 o'clock in the morning. So we didn't often get on the road until maybe 8:30 by the time you've had breakfast and, you know, whatever, and just got yourself together to get started, I think. Other options that you actually have for traveling, there are campgrounds. This company we went through would do a sort of supported camping bit too, where they would actually move your stuff from one campground to another, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I don't know what they're still doing with that, but they did provide that. And some of the lodging too, there was a bunkhouse in one place, for example, for lodging. So one of the places we stayed had 2 bed and breakfast rooms and a bunkhouse. So they didn't do any meals for the bunkhouse people, but they still had people coming in and going out, and they had camping in that same farm. So they were doing pretty well that way. I don't think they were doing a lot of farming.
Oh, I can't hear you, John.
One thing we can try to do is print out the web page and also the map and little book we can bring to the library. And if people want to follow up, they can look at it there.
Yeah, that would be great. All right. Well, thank you both so much. This has been such a wonderful talk. And one of our comments in the Q&A was that you convinced them that they wanted to go. So.
All right. My husband wants to go again and do it with our friend in Cambridge, the one that gave us the book, because he was interested.
Yeah, and thanks for both of you. Yeah, definitely inspirational, and this is a good time to be inspired. And you know, in the short term, everybody stay safe, but I'm really optimistic that we all can, you know, get in some good, you know, hiking, traveling, and certainly hiking locally. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming out, and until we see you next. Thank you.